This is the Horse Radio Network.
This is episode 204 of the Dressage Radio Show on the Horse Radio Network. This is Lindsay McCall from Jupiter, Florida.
And this is Susan Trebus from Winders, California. And you're listening to the Dressage Radio Show brought to you this week by the United States Para-Equestrian Association. We also have our producer, Glenn, with us.
Hi, guys. Hi, Susan. Been a long time.
Yes. How are you, Glenn?
Good. Of course, Susan, we spent a lot of time with Susan in the lead up to the 2010 World Equestrian Games. She was our spotlight para rider. So.
Oh, yes. Those were the days.
Yeah. I was just talking to Samantha, was my co-host, Lindsay, for the 2010 radio show about WEG. And Samantha now hosts the eventing radio show. And we were just talking about one of our favorite memories was the time we got to spend with Susan at WEG, just hanging out.
Aw.
It was one of my favorite memories, too, Glenn.
I have a picture of your horse and Samantha and I on my wall here in the studio. So
I know, that picture is kind of famous. It's made its way around the internet.
That's right. That's right. It's the only time Samantha and I looked good in 16 days. So that's what. So welcome to the show, Susan.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Well, Susan, it was nice to see you. I haven't seen you in a little while. I know you were pregnant the last time I saw you. And what have you been doing the last, year and a half since, WEG, 2010 WEG?
Yeah. Well, as you saw, I was pregnant, showing last March. And our son was born, Logan. He was born in August. And otherwise, I have just been running our horse training business with quite a few clients, and we have about 65 horses. And I'm preparing a young 8-year-old stallion to try out for the 2014 WEG team, and I'm currently showing him third level.
Wow, that's amazing. That's great. So where do we expect to see you next?
I'll be showing in all the open divisions for third level here in California, and we'll try for state championships here. And then in addition to that, I'll go ahead and try to get my WEG qualifying score at the CPEDI here in Northern California in June.
Nice. It's nice to finally see another show out on the West Coast for you. I know logistics have been an issue for West Coast versus East Coast because the travel going back and forth with the horses is very difficult. So it's pretty exciting for you. Yeah,
it'll be nice to have a show of this magnitude on our own home turf. After this commercial, we're going to have Kristi Wysocki. She is a S judge here in the United States, and she also happens to be one of the few 3-star international FEI para judges, also from the United States. She's quite an accomplished rider and also an accomplished breed show judge. I'll be talking to Kristi about her experience in becoming an FEI para judge and also her experiences in seeing FEI international para riders in Europe and comparing their riders to our riders to see where our riders need to go.
Glenn the Geek here. I get asked all the time by horse people, I want to build my own website. What service should I use? Well, there's only one service I recommend without hesitation, and that is squarespace.com. If you're looking to build a website for your horse farm, training business, boarding stable, or personal rider page, or maybe even a blog, and you want to do it yourself and end up with a professional-looking website, then there's only one place to go, Squarespace. Squarespace makes it easy with one of the simplest do-it-yourself interfaces available. You choose the theme you like, and then you just drag and drop the elements you want into that theme and start adding your pictures and content, and off you go. Plus, they give you 15 days to try it with no strings. They don't even ask for your credit card. If you sell things, they even have an e-commerce solution. Plus, your new website will integrate with Facebook and Twitter like a dream. I've been using this company for years and have recommended it to dozens of horse people. No matter what your skill level, Squarespace is for you. Give it a try for 15 days free by going to horseradionetwork.com and clicking on the Squarespace banner on the right side of the page. Horseradionetwork.com, click on the Squarespace banner on the right side of the page.
Kristi, so you are, not only are you a large S able-bodied dressage judge, but you're also a 3-star para judge, is that correct?
Yeah, the correct explanation of that would be I'm a U.S. Equestrian Federation S dressage judge, and I'm an FEI 3-star para dressage judge.
Okay, and what would you say is probably what was the largest learning curve for you going from not just being an able-bodied dressage judge, but also now working on getting your international FEI para-dressage credentials?
I think the biggest learning curve was to realize that there really isn't that much difference in the two, and that you have to remember that they aren't different, and not to judge them differently.
And so when you mean that, I mean, how would you compare, for instance, how do you judge the grades in the para-dressage judge versus the levels in able-bodied dressage?
Well, unfortunately, the U.S. Equestrian Federation, in their efforts to try to include the para-dressage into their shows, they have a process where they, for any type of FEI test, they equivalate it to a USEF level. And when that was done with the para tests, it gave a misconception as to the difficulty of the para tests. For example, the grade 1A level, it's considered a introductory level test in the USEF system, and it isn't even in the same realm as an introductory level test. The work in grade 1A, the walk work is more difficult than the walk work in the Grand Prix test.
Oh wow!
And so that's been a confusing factor that's caused a lot of problems in the whole system for riders, trainers, and judges. Because if they look at the rule book and go by the rule book and say, okay, if I ride grade 1A, or I judge grade 1A, or I teach grade 1A, they have to be riding at the caliber of introductory level. And that is very, very incorrect.
Right. So do you think that actually then is a problem with crossing over for some of the able-bodied judges judging para riders? So when they come in and do, for instance, a 1A test, they're looking at it as the equivalent of an intro test. So they perhaps might score the rider inaccurately in the horse?
It has caused confusion. And, most able-bodied judges don't have much training in the dressage in judging it. And so when they go to the rule book and see that, that's really their only indicator of how to judge the test. And so it has led to some erroneously high scores for some of these riders that then when they go and ride in a CPED, in an actual FEI recognized competition for para-dressage, they get surprised because their scores aren't anywhere close to what they were getting. And the USEF Para-Technical Committee right now, we're working on revising that so that problem will go away because it's only led to confusion.
And I've actually personally had that experience myself, showing in the para tests versus the able-bodied tests. If I show an able-bodied test, I usually get scored quite accurately. But then if I show the para test for that same judge, I have gotten, quite good scores, and then exactly as you said, the next week go out and get sometimes 10% lower at a CPED.
Right. And unfortunately, that's been caused by a lack of education. We're trying to improve upon that. At the USEF Judges Forum this year, there was 2.5 hours dedicated to para-dressage, and that was the main focus that was presented at that forum, that people really need to pay attention when they're judging this, that these are FEI level tests, and that the equivalencies in the USEF rule book really should only be considered from an entry standpoint only, and not from how you judge them. You must judge them at FEI level requirements. And I think there were 150 plus judges at that forum, and I think it helped a lot in the beginnings of educating our national judges.
And so, in addition to them being actual FEI tests and should be written to that FEI standard, is that you're saying that's true also as for the quality of the horses?
Absolutely.
Like, what's the quality of the horse you would see at that? What would be the quality of horse? Because I think you just got back from a trip to Europe, correct?
Yes, I was in Belgium this last weekend at a very large CPED competition that had riders from all over Europe, and then there was a couple of riders from Israel and a rider from Australia also there.
So what was the quality of horses that you saw at those competitions, and sort of then compared to the horses you're seeing here in the U.S.?
The quality of the horse is going to be dependent on what the rider wants to achieve. If the rider is getting started in the para-dressage, then they don't need as high of a caliber of horse as a rider who says, I want to go to Normandy to the World Equestrian Games for para-dressage, or I want to go, to Rio de Janeiro in 2016 to the Paralympics. It's the same thing as someone who wants to learn to ride Grand Prix and gets a schoolmaster. They're not going to get the same horse that Stephen Peters is going to get to go ride on our Olympic team. Right. And it's for our riders that want to compete at the Paralympics, they have to get high caliber, high quality horses. That's the only way they're going to be competitive. Because the quality of horses out there is phenomenal.
Right. So how do we bridge that gap here in the U.S., and then also how do we end up bridging the gap between what we're currently scoring and what we would need to score if, for instance, we were to be competitive on the international level?
We have to ride better, and we have to get higher quality horses. It
sounds easy.
It's not easy, but it's simple. It's not easy by any means, but it is simple. The quality of the horses have to be Olympic level horses, and the quality of riding has to be Olympic level riding.
And do you see that open show judges can have a role in sort of facilitating, bridging that gap with helping our para riders develop?
Well, I think the judges forum that we had in March was a first step in the right direction. There were over 150 judges there, and it was quite an eye-opener to many of them. We started by showing a video of a 1A ride that most of them were wanting to give the rider 7+ scores, and yet the horse was never even on the bit. And by the time we worked through the different, they showed 4 different 1A riders, and the final ride that we showed was the winning ride from the 1A Paralympics in London, where the horse got about an 82%. And when the judges saw a real 82% compared to what they had been giving, they realized that it is a different game. It is real dressage. It's not
Kristi,
therapeutic riding.
Exactly. Hey, it's Lindsay. I'd love you to kind of touch on how you are judging these riders, these para riders, because a lot of people are misunderstood that they think, oh, well, we're not looking at the horse at all. We're just looking at the rider. But you're also judging the horse. Can you talk about some of those technical requirements within the test that you are actually judging as a judge?
Well, and actually, to your comment, you're also judging the horse. You're really only judging the horse. Mm-hmm. I usually don't even notice the rider's handicaps because I watch the horse.
Right.
And sometimes in some of the training sessions and stuff I've been in, when the instructor has mentioned something about the rider that don't get focused on that, I hadn't even noticed the rider had that particular problem. And that's what you have to do when you're judging it. You have to judge the ride, not the rider. And whether the rider is basically laying down on the horse's neck, or if they look like they have no disability whatsoever. Some of them you would never know. Mm-hmm. You have to judge the ride. And the thing that people have to remember is the grade that a rider is placed in when they're classified based upon their physical disability, not based upon their riding ability. So their ability to ride is a totally separate subject. And if they get classified in a particular grade, but they're not a very good rider, they may not do very well at that grade. Mm-hmm. Because their classification and what grade they're put in is based upon their physical disability, not based upon their capability to ride. Mm-hmm. And people have to remember that. And when you're judging, the grade 1A is only walk, but it's harder than the walk work in the Grand Prix test.
Yeah. And, with the Grand Prix test, you only have a small amount of time that you're required to walk. And with the grade 1As, you're walking the entire time. And what is it like as a judge to see that and have to know the differences in between the walks?
Well, you better know walk rhythm well, because that's huge. The rhythm comes first in anything that you judge. That has to come as the foundation of the score. So you better be good at judging walk rhythm, because some of the horses, it's really interesting. There was one horse in Belgium this weekend that its walk quality ranged anywhere between a 4 and an 8, depending upon the moment. And let me tell you, that makes it challenging to figure out what score you're going to give it.
Wow.
When it's changing that much. And some of the better walks are the easier walks to interfere with and cause issues with, and that's exactly what was happening with that horse.
Wow. Kristi, have you found that this process has sort of given you a finer tuned look at things like the walk and the trot and rhythm as a judge on the whole, or did you have that ability to see that before you started your para judging credentials, and so that's why it's been that you've become that you're working on getting your higher para classification to judge the bigger shows?
When I got really good at judging rhythm of the horses was when I'm also a dressage sport horse judge, and the rhythm is the entire crux of that situation. So that's when I really started to pay attention to the rhythm and get much better at watching the rhythm, because that is 95% of what you're doing when you're judging those horses.
So what would your advice to other judges be, as far as how would you advise them to start judging para riders in open shows, or if they wanted to proceed and get their FEI credentials to judge CPETs and things like that? How would you get them started?
Well, the main thing to remember when you're judging these rides is there's nothing different. It's dressage, and it's FEI dressage, and you have to judge it at the caliber of FEI. And if you do that and you simply judge what you see that the horse is doing, you will give them a correct score. But if you start looking at what the rider's doing or what kind of aids they have or what kind of bridle they're using and that kind of thing, you're not going to focus on what the horse is doing. And if you focus on what the horse is doing, you'll put them in the right place. And it's the same thing. It is dressage. And I think people get confused when they try to make it something different. And it really isn't. It just happens to be a rider that has a handicap of some sort, a disability that they have to deal with in their riding. But you don't judge that. You judge the ride. And S judges in the United States are eligible to apply to the FEI to become FEI para-dressage judges. You must be an S judge because you must have judged Pre-St. George. And the reason for that is that they are FEI level tests. That's why it's only open to S judges, is because it is FEI level work.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And what's next for you, Kristi? Where are you off to next?
Well, I just came home from Belgium where I spent the weekend with about 4 mentors working on my promotion for my 4-star with the FEI. And I basically will spend the rest of the summer bouncing all over the United States, judging shows from the East Coast to the West Coast. So
amazing.
What will that 4-star credential enable you to judge?
Well, like for instance, a show that is a WEG qualifier, to be on the panel as a 3-star, they have to have a minimum of 5 judges, whereas if they have 4 stars and above, they can do it with 3 judges. So you can judge higher caliber shows.
I see.
And for the Europeans to ask you to judge for them over there, they're pretty much not going to bring anybody over unless you're a 4-star because if they want the experience.
Yeah.
Because para-dressage is, in my opinion, is probably the growing faster than any other equestrian sport there is right now. But the U.S. hasn't really jumped on the train yet. We're kind of running after the caboose trying to catch up. And Europe is off and running. I mean, it's a serious thing over there. The sponsorships they had for that show were unreal. The quality of horses they had. Holland had 10 horses there. Belgium had 8 horses there. There were 2 people from Israel that each rode 2 horses. I mean, it was big competition. The Brits weren't there at that particular show, but they're taking it very seriously, and they're working very, very hard at it to get, and they're super riders, really super riders. And our riders are we've got some catch-up work to do.
Yes. we need more judges, more people like you, and more trainers, and a lot more riders.
Well, the whole system in this United States, we're behind in our education of how it works, and we're probably where Europe was 10 years ago in our understanding of it. And for us to catch up with them, we're going to have to work really hard in the next 2 to 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we've got potential. We've got some riders with a lot of talent, and if we can get them with the right horses and with really good training, I think it's doable. But they're going to have to work very, very hard.
Yes.
It is an Olympic sport.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I think that everybody has to remember. It's the Olympics.
Yeah.
It's more difficult than going to regionals.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And we sometimes don't take it that seriously in this country.
Yeah, I get a lot of calls from para riders trying to break in the sport, and it's amazing, you know, the groundwork that I'm having to do to educate the riders, as far as the quality of training you have to have, the quality of riding you have to have, the quality of horse you have to have, and that just because you went to an open show on the weekend and got a 75% does not mean that you're going to go to a CPEDI and get that score. In fact, I keep telling them expect at minimum 10% less than what you get at an open show, unless you're in front of an actual para judge, because that's just been my experience.
Yeah. I think that's going to improve because we're starting to educate the judges too, and we're also working on modifying the rules so that they're not so confusing with the equivalency issue. So I think that will improve from that angle. But the other thing that people really have to remember is just because I'm a para rider doesn't mean I'm going to the Olympics.
Right.
I'm going to have to work really, really hard, and I'm going to have to ride and get super training, and I'm going to have to work out, and I'm going to have to be as physically fit as I can possibly be, and I'm going to have to find sponsorship, and I'm going to have a really quality horse. And it's more than just because I'm a para rider I can go to the Paralympics. It's not that way anymore. It might have been 15 years ago, but it's not now.
Right. Right.
I ride Grand Prix, but I'm not going to be on our Olympic team.
Right. Yeah. Right.
We have to remember that. And if they do want to try to be on the Paralympic team, they're going to have to work as hard as Stephen Peters does. He works out 3-4 hours a day, rides 6 horses a day, has a psychologist, has a coach for his work, for his physical workouts, that kind of thing. I mean, it's not just that you ride your horse for a half hour a day and you're ready to go.
Right.
There's a lot more to it than that.
Right.
Well, we thank you for your time today, Kristi, for coming on the show, because I know you just literally landed from coming back from Europe. So thank you so much, and your insight has been amazing and wonderful, and I think you explained it quite well.
And thank you for your dedication, too, to the sport.
Well, it's worth it. We've got a lot of riders that have got a lot of potential, so we've got to figure out how to do it the right way in this country so we can be successful. We've got the potential to be successful, but we're going to have to work hard. It's not going to land in our lap.
All right after this commercial, you're going to want to stay with us because we have Gil Merrick coming on our show, and he's going to be talking about a couple of things such as team building, and his expertise goes all the way back to when he was the former USEF High Performance Dressage Director, and he was also the team leader at the 2006 World Equestrian Games in Aachen, the 2007 Pan Am and 2008 Olympic Games for the dressage team. So he has some great insight onto team building, pipeline, and maybe even some scouting. And he is also part of horseshow.com. He's a big part of that. So he's going to give us a little insight on that as well.
Hi all, Glenn the Geek here, and we're excited to bring you a special offer for Horse Radio Network listeners from one of my favorite companies, and that is Audible.com. Audible.com is the premier provider of digital audiobooks. Audible has over 85,000 titles to choose from in every genre: thrillers, business, romance, comedy, sci-fi, sports, and so much more. Audible titles play on your iPhone, your Kindle, your Android, or more than 500 different devices that you can listen anytime, anywhere. My wife and I love Audible books. We've been a member of Audible since 2004 and have listened to over 100 books with Audible. What horse person, who has time as a horse person to sit down and to read a book anymore? Yet I found the time to listen to books on Audible. When I'm not listening to podcasts while I'm riding, cleaning stalls, or at the gym, or driving, I'm listening to Audible books. And for the listeners of the Horse Radio Network, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 14-day trial to give you a chance to check out their service. All you have to do is go to audibletrial.com/HRN. That's audibletrial.com/HRN for Horse Radio Network. And you can download your free audiobook and get your 14-day free trial today. If you can't remember that, just check out our website and you'll find a link to it right there. Enjoy your book. We know you will.
All right, I'm here with Gil Merrick, and Gil is a former USF High Performance Dressage Director, and what's also kind of fun is he's from my area up in Cleveland, and we were just communicating over email this morning about how both of us knew this trainer and worked with Lewis and Lewis and Howard Lewis up in Cleveland. So I didn't know that, Gil. That was really fun to know and learn about you.
That was interesting to read your email, and we didn't share names of the places we both rode and the different things we did. And as soon as we did, it clicked on about 10 different levels. So it was a nice exchange.
Yeah, it really was. I was pretty excited about that. But I'm so excited to have you on the show as well. And I'd like to kind of talk to you about a couple of things. And I guess the first thing I'd like to talk to you about is, how do you think a team approach really to help build our para-dressage sport? Because we're really trying to develop our sport further.
Well, when Hope Hand shared with me the information about the National Para-Dressage Training Symposium that's coming up at the end of May, and said that it was going to focus on this team approach, it resonated with me on a lot of different levels, and probably the first one was being able to serve as team leader for the U.S. dressage teams at the international events during my tenure with the U.S. Equestrian Federation, and to watch all the different teams from all the different countries prepare themselves for the games and then certainly participate in the games. And now, because there's so much more information on the internet, learning about kind of what they're doing between, the major international events. And it all points to managing themselves effectively as a team. And I don't mean just the horse and rider combinations who are going to the event, the grooms who support them, the owners of the horses. Certainly that's the core team. But when they're preparing for the events and when they're looking at how they fund themselves as a discipline so that they can continue to go to these international events, and you start to realize the requirements to have a team that spreads much, much broader than kind of your nucleus of going to the event, where just take the challenge of finding the horses that are appropriate to go to the games. That requires a national or even international network of people who are partnered with that focus. And what we're seeing now in the able-bodied dressage, and this has been built over the last 3 years, is a real pipeline using, the youth coach and the developing coach and the national coach and the national young horse coach. They're going to events together, and they're all basically in a 24/7, 365 talent search mode. They're looking for the talented horses. They're looking for the talented riders. And so I see that as a team approach to talent search, whether it's for the riders or for the horses. And I know that in the para community, there's a lot of that being built out now in partnership with the therapeutic riding centers and with the veterans programs. So it all calls for well-organized, highly effective teams.
And how did you do this as a team leader back in the years that you were the team leader in 2006 and 2007? What were you doing specifically to help build the team for able-bodied dressage?
Well, I think a lot of what goes on, and Ann Gribbons was a great coach to me during that time, and that was before she took on the position that she just wrapped up last year. And she said to me, having, of course, competed internationally for the U.S., she said, Gil, there's a very interesting dynamic that's going to go on, that these horse and rider combinations are working for years to get the kind of qualifying scores, to get their FEI minimum requirements, to get themselves to a selection trial, to do well at the selection trial and be in the top group of 4 or 5 horse rider combinations that actually get named to the team. She said, all the way up to that point, it's almost the rider as an individual trying to create this kind of success. Now, they certainly have a team around them. They have their families, and they have their trainers, and they have the farriers and the vets and the grooms and everybody who comes together to help that happen. But it's kind of their individual team going through a years-long process to get ready to go to a selection trial and then be named to the team. At the point they're named to the team, and this is where Anne's coaching was so great, she said every rider on the team is fully aware that they're going to go, let's say it's to the Olympic Games, and they're going to be competing for their country. And everybody's score matters. It's a team effort. All the riders locked at the hip, they're a team. She said the dynamic changes up a little bit, though, after the team competition when it moves into the individual, because some riders drop out and not everybody moves forward. And she said, and then they kind of go back into the individual team approach to what they're doing, even though they're certainly representing the country and winning medals for their country. She said, just pay attention. She said, it's very easy for the whole team to start to break apart a little bit. And I said, well, what would I do about that? And she said, well, the challenge is how you build the strength of the team leading up to the event. And a lot of it is how each individual rider relates to the team coach or the team manager or the people who are there doing the support function, and reminding people on a regular basis all through this process, the leading up to a selection trial, selecting the team, training and going to the games, that can take over 2 months sometimes. So the work gets to be building the relationships between all the different people who are on the team, so that everybody's very clear what the focus is, what the intended outcome is, what the plan is to make it happen, and that everybody understands their individual role in that and how they're contributing to what the team's doing. So that sometimes is as simple as organizing how people have their meals together, when you're preparing for one of these events, so that somebody's not disconnected from the group because they'd rather sit maybe on their own and in a restaurant and not be part of the group. The challenge then is to say, okay, the athletes need their time on their own, and a lot of athletes need a lot of that time on their own, and there are certain things that have to happen as a group dynamic. And I think, I don't want to be cliche about this because God knows it gets enough airtime, but it does boil down to the communication that goes on within the team members and just being clear and saying, this is downtime. Everybody's on their own. Go use that time the way you need to. But at 7:30, we're all convening here, and here's why we're convening, and here's what we're going to do.
Yeah, Gil, this is Susan, and I was on the 2010 U.S. Para-WEG team, and I've also been involved in other teams outside of para-dressage sport, either, skiing or softball or other sports. And I totally hear what you're saying as far as creating, more communication and a team like atmosphere, even though we're in an individual sport. That's something that I've seen we've really struggled with in the para world, in part because there are not as many of us across the country, and then because we are across the country. For instance, I'm in California. There are a lot of other of my team members on the East Coast. But one thing I do notice coming out of other teams, for instance, the Canadian team, that is that there is more of a team mentality. Their country affiliate helps them as a team. They've selected, top riders that then the country affiliate assists. Do you think that's something, I don't know what your experience is, if that was helpful for the able-bodied riders, but do you think that's, a direction that the para riders could go, where there's an actual distinction between the national riding program and the high-performance riding program?
Well, I think what needs to be clear is that how the pipeline is developed, so that the people who are participating in the national program understand, and I Hope shared with us a PowerPoint presentation that did a phenomenal job of outlining how the athlete development program works, the role of the national groups, how you make your way into an elite athlete status, and what kind of programs are available there. So I think I'm going to circle back to what I was saying. My answer is yes, and that's key to it is, as the para community expands the coaching body, as far as people who are individual coaches, people who might be coaching on a clinician basis, and then having a developing coach, and then certainly having the high-performance coach, and making sure that everything that they're doing, I mentioned before, the talent search for the horses, and being able to identify the right horses, that the leadership of all that is coming from, the USPEA, partnered with the USEF, partnered with the high-performance director, partnered with the coaches, that body kind of sets the tone for this is a team effort. And then in working with, as the body of coaches expands, make sure they understand how all that works, and then you bring them on board. And because I see, that's where I started off by saying, I watched other countries and what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I would say, if you measured it, the countries who are the most successful in growing the discipline of para and the results that they're achieving at the events, it's directly linked to their effectiveness in building these teams and teams that address what you brought up at first, which was our geographical challenge. It's a small community that's widely dispersed, and boy, is that a challenge.
Even the suggestion you made of sort of scouting or talent searching, I mean, I can see where that could be a really useful role in our country just because it's so big and we don't know really what's out there.
No.
So, more communication and more organization on that front could really play a vital role.
And I think too, as the teams become more mature and they understand that it is a team and that this is a national effort that needs to be coordinated and that the communication has to be coordinated. I know because I travel around the able-bodied dressage community all over the country, and I would bet the majority of people who are very serious in the able-bodied dressage aren't aware of the unique requirements for the horses in the para program, and that many of those horses are donated, and what that means and how that all works, and what kind of horses are really good candidates for this. Because my feeling is that as the communication expands around that, we're going to see more and more people standing up and going, oh my gosh, I have a horse like that.
Yeah.
He could have another job now, and he could go do that. He's not doing the Grand Prix anymore, but by God, he could certainly do his job at a different level and would probably be perfect. And that boils down to education and communicating that out so people understand how are the teams, how do they get access to horses and who owns those horses and how are the expenses paid and how does all that work? So, again, generating that communication from a team that understands that's part of our mission. We need to educate the community on how this all works.
Mm-hmm. We have a symposium coming up, and I'd like to talk a little bit about helping that pipeline. We have a symposium in Maine coming up. It's open to auditors and it's open to riders to still apply for to register for. And you're going to be a part of that. And what is so important about a symposium like this, where we're bringing all these people in? Maybe you can explain to our audience what we are actually doing at the symposium and who we're bringing in.
I would be happy to do that. First off, this is the epitome of building teams and getting a unified message and having a strategy, and that is we all live on the internet and we do the emailing and we can have conference calls, and those are all incredibly valuable tools, but there's nothing like bringing people from around the country together at a venue. And in this case, May 29th and 30th it's the Train the Trainer workshop, and then it's followed by 2 days of rider symposium. And if you look at, for instance, the clinicians, Hanneke Gerritsen, who's an FEIO judge, she's an Olympic technical delegate, and she comes from Holland, and many people in the para community are familiar because she's so generous with her time over here. You have Catherine Haddad-Stoller. She's one of our top international dressage competitors and trainers, and she's now back in the United States. We lost her to Europe there for a number of years. And she's participating, as is Clive Milkins, who's the 2012 Paralympic gold medal team coach for Great Britain. So you have just this great body of people who are coming in as clinicians. And then you take the leadership from the USPEA. Hope Hand is the president of that organization and will be lecturing there. We have Laura Dow, who's a fundraising and marketing expert, who's coming to the event, as well as Tina Wentz, a national classifier and also USPEA board member. and Susan Grant, who's a licensed occupational therapist and a hippotherapy clinical specialist, along with Janet Smaldone, who's also a licensed physical therapist and hippotherapy clinical specialist. So you bring all these people together, and you focus on training the trainers, training the riders, and having all these opportunities for dialogue and for hands-on learning. These are horse and rider combinations in the ring. It's a big investment as far as the participants. There's travel expenses involved and time out of our calendars to attend. But I have no question that a lot is going to come out of the symposium as far as this was a very valuable use of everyone's time. How do we build on this? What do we now, as a team of people who just experienced this, how do we take it forward and go to the next level with this?
And I'd like to switch gears a little bit, and I also wanted to ask you a little bit about horseshow.com, because I know that's been in the works for a couple years, and you guys have a few shows running on there. What are you doing with that lately? What's going on there?
Well, we're excited now that we have our affiliation with the U.S. Paraequestrian Association, and since we started that conversation, we've, as a company, Horseshoe.com's received a license from the FEI to use all of their tests, the dressage tests, on our website. And what we're offering right now, our website provides access to experts, whether they're clinicians or judges or coaches, to people who might not otherwise have access. And that's, of course, the beauty of the Internet. And the key in our educational offering is that someone can make a video of them training. Maybe it's at their home training facility. And these are shorter videos. They're 5, 6, 7 minutes. And put the video up on the site. And then we host clinics. And right now, we just opened one with Kristi Wysocki. And Kristi will watch the video that's been submitted. And it could be a video of a test that was ridden at a competition, or it could be a training video from home. And she will then record a voiceover commentary in real time as she watches the video. So it's like she's talking to you and evaluating the ride. So that you can get instant feedback from somebody who has the credentials of Kristi Wysocki in a very short period of time. And riders can do this as often as they like. Our commitment to the para community, we're doing this for free. So riders can submit the videos. There's no cost to do it. And the next event we're going to host will be where you can ride one of the tests. It will be a ride-a-test clinic. Put that video up on the site, and one of the international judges will provide a full scorecard for the ride and the voiceover commentary. So you'll get a scorecard, you'll see how it would have scored in the ring, and then be coached by one of the experts who many riders might otherwise have no access to, and no way to achieve them. So that's kind of the main thing that we're doing on the site now. That's our focus, is the educational component of the site. And we have a forum there. We'd love to see the para community get active in discussing different training points and get to know each other through there. But the focus, as I say, is this model for voiceover coaching from experts that people might not otherwise have access to.
Well, Gil, I appreciate you coming on the show today, and thank you for your time. And I know I'll look forward to seeing you in Maine at the symposium just coming up. Well, before the end of the show, I just have a couple of news announcements coming off the printer. And the 2013 U.S. National Para Dressage Training Symposium in Maine is coming up, and that's May 29th through June 1st. And riders can still register for it, and they can also contact Hope Hand or Laureen Johnson at USEF about registering for that, or they can always contact me, Lindsay, at uspea.org. I also wanted to announce that Derek Perkins, who was one of our guests last week, or on the show, the last time we were on the show, and he's our veteran. He qualified on NTEC Richter scale, which was Jonathan Wentz's horse, and he qualified to compete at the Paraequestrian Dressage National Championships. So a little high five for him, because we were pretty excited for him. And also we have some news in the para-driving world. The World Para-Driving Championships for 2014, there's been 2 bids put forward to host that. And those 2 bids were Great Britain and Germany, and they'll have a meeting in July to decide where that's actually going to be. So it's pretty exciting for our para-drivers for their 2014.
I'd also like to add that the opening date for the California Rancho Marietta Golden State Dressage, CPEDI, in June is coming up, and that will be on May 1st. So be sure to check the Golden State Dressage website, and you'll be able to find the show entries and premiums for the California CPEDI.
You can find our show notes and links to today's guests on the website at dressageradio.com. You can like us on Facebook. Just search for Dressage Radio Show. Follow us on Twitter at Horse Radio. You can learn more about the United States Para-Equestrian Association at uspea.org and, of course, on Facebook. And don't forget to check out all the other shows on the Horse Radio Network at horseradionetwork.com.
And can I give a plug here? This is Rolex Week, big time, biggest show of the year for the eventers. So be sure to check out this week's eventing radio show for a preview. And next week we'll do a wrap-up show there. And also next week on Horses in the Morning, which I host every morning from 9 to 10:30 live at horsesinthemorning.com. We'll be doing a lot of coverage on the Run for the Roses, the Kentucky Derby coming up next weekend. So wanted to get that plug in. And Susan, what's your website?
My website is susantrebus.com.
And did you really say 65 horses?
Yeah.
That's way too much poop.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yes.
65 horses.
That's just way too much poop is what I was thinking. That's way too much.
we started this business 3 years ago, and it's tripled in size in 3 years.
Oh, my God. You know, I always had a rule as a horse husband. When you went over 7 horses, the amount of work triples. When you go over 12 horses, the amount of work quadruples. When you go over 60, I don't know what happens.
Well, we don't have to ride all those 60, but
but you have to clean up and feed them. I mean, that's a lot.
They're here and they're cared for.
Bless you, Susan.
So my question is, where does
bless
the
your
manure
husband.
go?
What'd you say?
I said, my question is, the obvious elephant in the room, where does all the manure go?
Oh, yes. We have 120 acres and we reuse it.
Okay, so you spread it?
Yeah, we spread it and we actually create really nice trails with the manure and the shaving. So we have really good hacking trails that we can cross-train on.
Amazing. Great.
Yeah, if you come out to California for the Cite, Lindsay, I'll give you a tour. Our place is pretty cool.
Oh, I would love that. That would be great. I would love that.
And Glenn and Sam have had standing invitations for 3 years.
No bust there. The problem is every time we come out, she wants to put a pitchfork in our hands, and we just keep saying, no.
Right.
So watch that, Lindsay, when you go out.
Yeah,
I will.
Did I mention we're a half hour from Napa?
Okay, well, at least we can get drunk before we get the pitchfork. So that'll be good. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Glenn.
Oh, thank you.
All right, see y'all next week with Reese and Phillip. We'll be back with the Dressage Radio.